Hi guys, Mimi G here of MimiGstyle.com, and today we're going to be doing another sew along for one of my latest pre-fall simplicity patterns, pattern 8702, my tracksuit. Now if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, make sure and watch the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below. Watch that, then come and sew along with me. Alright guys, so we're working with 8702 and we're going to do the jacket now, which is view A. On the back of the pattern envelope, you obviously have all of your fabric recommendations and any notions that you're going to need. All right, let's go over the pieces you're going to need to cut out. So we're gonna cut out pattern piece number 6, which is the back. You're gonna cut out pattern piece number 16, which is the sleeve band, and you can choose to cut this out of fabric or out of rib knit if you have it handy. The same goes for the lower band. If you have rib knit, you're going to cut pattern piece number 15 on the fold. If you are using fabric, you're going to cut pattern piece number 15 on the fold. Then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 14, which is the front bands. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 13, which is the collar, and you're going to interface it. You should also interface your front band pieces. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 12, which is the back facing. Pattern piece number 5, which is the yoke front. Pattern piece number 4, which is our lower front. Pattern piece number 1, the upper front. Pattern piece number 3, which is our lower stripe. For our sleeve, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 8, which is the sleeve center. Pattern piece number 7, which is the sleeve front. Pattern piece number 9, which is the sleeve back. Pattern piece number 2, which is the upper stripe. For your lining pieces, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 11, which is the front. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 10, which is the sleeve lining, and then you're going to grab pattern piece number 6 again, which is the back, and you're going to cut one on the fold of lining. Okay, so I know at first when you look at the jacket, it has like a million pieces and it can seem a bit overwhelming, but it really isn't. Once you do this front part, it's easy going after that. And so I'm going to show you how I pin the entire thing and then literally go to the sewing machine. You're just going to sew straight lines. It's super fast, so don't stress yourself. Okay, so you're going to grab pattern piece 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to start with 4 and 3. And you have notches, right? So make sure that you transferred all of your notches because that makes it so much easier. Okay, so go ahead and pin. And now you're going to go ahead and grab the next piece, which is number 2. Right sides are facing, of course, and match that notch again. And if you're wondering if these little points are supposed to be extending, they are, so don't worry, just make sure that you're aligning your notches. Okay, then go ahead and flip it up. You're going to grab your upper front, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to align your notch. Pin. And now as you can see, you've got the entire thing pinned. Now you're just going to go to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Move on to the next one, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then do your last one, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when you're done, I'll show you how to attach the front portion. Okay, so as you can see, I have all my pieces together, and I like to press my seams open. You'll notice that I have these little peaks here, so I'm just going to trim them away. And I'll do the same thing in the front. And now we're going to grab pattern piece number 5, which is the yoke front. And you have 2 notches, right? So you want to match up your 2 notches with the 2 notches that are on your yoke piece. The yoke is going to extend past the shoulder, and it is going to extend past the bottom, so that should look this way in case you're wondering. Now go ahead, head to your sewing machine, and again, you're just gonna stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and trim off my little peak. And you're gonna do your other one the same exact way. And you wanna make sure that everything is lined up, right? Because even when we attach our zipper, we're going to make sure, double checking that we have both of our pieces aligned so that the chevron stays intact. You don't wanna attach your zipper or sew incorrectly and then end up with a zigzag like that, because that's not cute. So you wanna make sure that you are using exact 5/8 of an inch seam allowances so that when we line this up, everything falls in place. All right, now we're gonna attach front to back at the shoulder seam. So grab your back piece, and with right sides facing, you're going to lay it over the top of your fronts, and we're going to pin at the shoulders. Make sure you align your notches, always align your notches. This is really easy. It's just a lot of straight lines. If you can stitch a straight line, you're good to go. Okay, I'm going to turn this over. And while I have you here, we're just going to go ahead and pin our side seams. Again, align your notch. And the other side. Now that it's all pinned, go ahead and head to your sewing machine. You're going to sew a straight stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance across the shoulder and down your side seams. Okay, once you have your shoulders and your side seams sewn, we can go ahead and attach our collar. So grab your collar, the interfaced one, and you're going to first align your notches right sides facing that you have in the back of your jacket. And then pin at the center front. And then again in between. Okay, now you're going to go ahead and stitch across your collar using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have your collar on, I went ahead and pressed my seam allowances up towards the collar. We're going to set this aside for just a second. So I want you to grab your lower band and your front band pieces that you should have interfaced. And what we're going to do is with right sides facing, go ahead and align that notch. You're going to pin it. And again, more straight lines. You're just going to stitch down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to do the same thing for the other side. Align your notch, pin, and then stitch down 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and attach our band to our jacket. So with right sides facing, you're going to go ahead and pin. Make sure you align the notch that's on this little front band to the notch that's on your jacket. And then continue pinning, matching notches. You're going to be stretching that middle section, so make sure that you're aligning those notches. Okay, once you have it in place, you're going to do, guess what? Yet another straight line using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have our lower band on, and we're going to attach our zipper first before we attach our lining in this. So this seems long, but it's because it gets folded in half. Okay, so you should have marked 2 little dots. So that's the center of your band. That's where your zipper is going to end. Now, in the pattern envelope, I did design this with a 2-way zipper. However, I don't have one in the studio. So we're going with just a separating zipper. But nothing changes as far as the installation. It's exactly the same. Okay, so I do have a little tiny trick that I use to make sure that these are exactly on the same size. So when I zip up my zipper, my jacket doesn't look goofy and ends up like this, okay? So what we're gonna do first is we're going to pin the zipper to one side, okay? So you're gonna put the end of your zipper where that dot is, and I'm going to pin, and I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I like to pin a lot because I don't want my fabric to pull too much as I'm stitching, because we're working not only with a knit, but also with trying to match up the chevron. If you don't pin and you just end up winging it, you're gonna end up with unmatched chevrons, and that is not a good look, all right? Now I have an extra long zipper, and I usually do that so that the zipper pull stays out of my way as I'm sewing. That actually wasn't my intention today, but I'm using the zipper that I had handy, so it's just a little bigger, but it really isn't gonna make much of a difference because this will get caught in my seam allowance, so doesn't matter. We're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch this down. I'm gonna show you this on camera and actually stitch it down because I think it's really important for you to see where I'm stitching it and then how we're going to mark the other side so that it's in the exact same place. All right, we're gonna start stitching at the top. Now really quickly, I had to unpin my zipper and repin it because I had it facing up. And you wanna make sure that your zipper is facing down, okay? So just double check. And now this really depends on you. So some people like to see a lot of the zipper tape. Some people like to see very little of the zipper tape. Technically, you should be following the instructions and sewing the seam allowance that they give you. However, I like to show just a little bit more of my zipper tape because I think it looks really nicely. So I'm going to stitch, making sure that the side of my zipper foot is along the zipper tape. I'm gonna open up my zipper just to get past my zipper pull. You want to back stitch. So right now I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from my zipper teeth, and that'll give me a nice amount of that white zipper tape that will show through. And then once I get past it, I can go ahead and close my zipper out and continue sewing. Okay, so now I want to make sure that when I'm sewing that these same chevron lines end up at the same exact place. And so the easiest way for me to do that is to use my fabric marker, and I use my ruler. So what I do is I make sure that this is completely straight, and right at that tip I mark on the other side where that's supposed to end up, right? So that I know that this line here, as I'm pinning, needs to be there in order for it to match. Okay, then I move up to the next one. I make sure I am completely parallel. I'm right at that seam line, and then I mark. Now, yes, I am marking on the right side of my zipper tape, even though when we stitch it down, we're gonna be looking at the back, but I can see my dots through the zipper tape. And the reason I do that is because if I try and align it this way, I'm not gonna get an exact match, okay? Because I can't see exactly where that point is, but I can see it on the right side. And then you're going to do that for every intersecting part. So you're gonna do it for the yoke and the collar, and also for the band, right? Just to make sure, I'm gonna mark. And then you obviously have a little dot already that you had marked on your little piece here where your zipper ends. And then you also wanna mark where your collar ends at the top. Okay, now we can go ahead and open the zipper. Now we don't have to worry that much. You're going to flip your zipper over so it's facing down. You should be able to see your dots on the other side. And you're going to pin exactly where those dots are intersecting at your seam lines. So first I'm going to do the end of my zipper. And you may even want to use a couple of extra pins on this side because it's really important that everything lines up. I'm going to make sure that that dot is exactly where it needs to be. And then the other dot, same thing. Okay, now you're gonna go to your sewing machine, you're gonna stitch your zipper tape down the same way we did the other side. All right, now you can zip up your jacket. If you made any mistakes or it's off too much, just unstitch that specific area and pull right? And then stitch. It's sort of a quick and easy fix because you're working with a knit. You have that ability, but it should all be lining up really nicely. So set this aside. We're going to work on our sleeve. All right, now grab your middle sleeve piece and your sleeve front and sleeve back. I'm going to set this aside. Now what you're going to do is you're going to pin your center band to the front and then your center band to the back, okay? So we're going to pin it all at one time and do some straight lines. You should have 2 notches, okay? So make sure you're aligning your notches right sides facing. Go ahead and pin. Okay, now go ahead and flip it to the other side and you're going to grab your other one. And you have a single notch, so make sure you pin there. Okay, so now just like we did earlier, go to your machine. You're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then move on to the other side, stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, when you're done, your sleeve should look like this. Now you're going to fold it right sides facing, and you're going to pin your underarm seam. Align that notch. You're going to go ahead and stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to do that for both of your sleeves. Okay, so I went ahead and grabbed pattern piece number 16, which is our sleeve band, and you're going to fold it right sides facing, and you're going to stitch it closed using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to fold, press, and attach it to the bottom of our sleeve. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and slip our cuff over our sleeve. Match that underarm seam with the seam on your cuff. And you're going to need to stretch, okay? So you're going to pin, stretch, pin, stretch. Okay, now you're just going to go to your sewing machine. You're going to stitch around your cuff using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And remember, you will need to pull in between your pins to make it fit. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and pin our sleeve to our jacket. So first I'm going to match up my underarm seams. And I'm going to match up my shoulder seam, my double notch, my single notch, and then I'm just going to pull. We're working with a knit fabric, so I didn't do any easing stitches. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and stitch around our sleeve using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to back stitch at the beginning and just go slow all the way around. Okay, now that both our sleeves are attached, we can go ahead and start putting together our lining. Okay, you're going to go ahead and grab your back facing and you're going to press under a 1/4 inch all the way around, and we're going to place it wrong side of facing to the right side of the back piece. You have 2 notches at the neck. Pin at the shoulder so it doesn't shift on you. And then you want to pin around the curve. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. We're going to edge stitch all the way around. Okay, we're going to back stitch at the beginning, and we're sewing close to the edge. And I'm just going to baste the very top at the neckline. Okay, you're going to go ahead and put your lining together much like you did the jacket, okay? So you're going to place your fronts together, right sides facing. You're going to stitch the shoulder and the side seam. On one of your sides, you're going to leave an opening, okay? You're going to leave at least a 6-inch opening because we're going to need it to finish off our sleeves. So for one side, leave a 6-inch opening. The other side, you're going to sew it exactly the way we did for the jacket. Then you're going to attach your sleeve the same way that we just attached the sleeve onto our jacket. And then we'll go ahead and attach the collar. You're going to attach the collar the same exact way that you attached it to the jacket. Okay, so I did my lining and I left my 6-inch opening on my side seam. And now what we're gonna do is, first we have to attach the bottom, okay? So you're going to pin right sides facing the bottom of the lining to your band, and you're going to match up those same notches that you have, and you're going to pin. Okay, once you have it pinned, you're going to do the same thing you did with your jacket. You're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to need to stretch a bit to make it all fit. Okay, once you have the bottom, now we're going to go ahead and pin the remaining part of the jacket. So first, we're going to do one side of the zipper, okay? So of course, your right sides are facing. This is going to fold up like this. Make sure to align your seam line there so that it's nice and even. Pin. And then I'm going to pin at my collar first. So at the top. And then I'm going to match my seam. Okay, there's certain areas that you want to align first. Okay, and now I can pin the rest of the front. Okay, now we can do the top portion of our collar. And now you're going to pin the other front the same way. So bring up the band. Make sure that your seams are aligned. And then do your collar. Make sure your seam is aligned. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and sew up the zipper and around the other way. So I'm starting off making sure that I can see the jacket versus the lining because I want to follow my existing stitching line, and I put my zipper foot back in. So I'm going to back stitch at the beginning. And I'm just going to try to follow my stitching line as closely as I can. Now I'm going to reach inside my jacket through that opening in the lining, and I'm going to move my zipper pull out of the way because I can feel it. There we go. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and stitch the top portion of our collar. Careful going through your teeth. You're going to pivot and you're going to go down following your existing stitching line to close out the front. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and trim our corners on the collar. And now we're going to turn this puppy right side out, right through this side opening. Okay, now before we move further, go ahead and press everything nice and flat. So press your collar, press the front, and then press your bottom. Okay, so now we're gonna anchor the bands together so that they don't move, right? So they're not loose like this. I like to turn my jacket right side out and press it so I know exactly that my band is pressed in half. So I just put my hand into the opening, and you basically want to grab both of the linings at the seam allowance only. And I don't do the entire thing, I only do a section of it. So I pin usually just in between my side seams, laying flat, and then I just grab them both so that I know that they're both lined up. And without having to turn the entire jacket wrong side out again, you're just going to stitch in between those notches, okay? So you're going to sew through all thicknesses, right, both seam allowances, and just follow your existing stitching line. Okay, all we have left to do is to attach the lining of the sleeve to our cuff. And so what you're going to do is you're going to turn your jacket wrong side out. You're going to slip your sleeve inside of your lining sleeve. And first you're going to make sure that your underarm seam of your lining is matching the underarm seam of your sleeve. Okay, that's really important because you don't want your sleeve and your lining to be twisted up. Now with the cuff still on the inside, you see I have not pulled my cuff out. Still on the inside. With the cuff still on the inside, you see I have not pulled my cuff out, right? The cuff is still on the inside. My underarm seams are matching up. You're going to pinch under, fold under your seam allowance on your lining, okay? Turn under the way you see me doing here. Literally fold under the seam allowance. You're matching these up. Okay, now this looks confusing, but it'll make sense in just a minute. From the inside of your jacket, hold that in place. I'm going in between my lining and my jacket, and I'm going to grab this on the inside, okay? And then just pull it out through the opening. Don't let go of it. And I'm gonna pin. And now we're going to continue pinning around the cuff. Match the notch. And now we're going to follow the existing stitching. I'm going to do this on camera with you, but I'm going to set it aside and I'm going to do my other sleeve the same way. So I'll give you another look at it. It can be a little bit confusing. So again, I'm going to pull my jacket sleeve through my lining sleeve. I'm leaving my cuff tucked to the inside. I'm going to match my underarm seams. I'm going to turn under the hem allowance on my lining. I'm going to fold under, and I'm going to hold that in place. Through the opening, I'm going to grab it. This has you avoiding any hand stitching, which is great. Pull it, make sure you don't lose it, and pin. All right, let's go sew this. Okay, so you can see I'm working only on the seam allowance. I'm gonna sew through all layers, and we're using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just go slow. I know it's kind of a tight opening. You're gonna sew the other one the same way. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and pull our sleeves out. So just put them back in there. And now I'm gonna pull. And then I'm gonna show you what it looks like finished. All right, so this is your lining. And now the lining is attached completely around the cuff without you having to do any hand stitching. Pull your other sleeve out. Okay, once your sleeves are inside of your jacket and your jacket is turned all the way right side out, the only thing left for you to do is to close out the opening that we have in our side seam. Now you can choose to do this by slip stitching it by hand, or you can simply hold it down like this and edge stitch that closing on the sewing machine, and then you are all done. Well, that's all there is to it. I hope you've enjoyed this so long. Please make sure and follow me on Instagram at MimiGStyle and use the following hashtags. Hashtag MimiGStyle tutorials or MimiGStyle patterns. Now, if you want some further instruction on sewing, you can also sign up for sewitacademy.com. Until next time, peace.